Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Phil Easton, and I'm the director of the American College Center for Military and Veterans Affairs. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar, which is Military Support Organizations providing resources, opportunities, and awareness to transitioning military members, veterans, and spouses. As we wait for folks to sign one, we have a few announcements to share. If you have any questions throughout the discussion, please enter them in the question and answer, the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If time allows, we will have a question and answer session toward the end of the webinar and try to answer as many questions as we can.
Thank you, Phil. And let me first start off by saying welcome to all of our attendees that are on today. We really appreciate your attendance and your interest in our center and our activities and the programs that we bring to you. Also, I want to introduce our special guest today. Today we have a great group of professionals that are going to talk to us about those transitioning military members and spouses. First of all, we have Mr. Bob Hogan, founder and CEO of Bridging My Return. We have Mr. Jay Salter, founder, executive director of Act Now Education. And we have Mr. Eric Eversole, vice president, U.S. Chamber of Commerce and president, Hiring Our Heroes. Gentlemen, welcome. Bob, Jay, Eric, thank you for your service to our military community. Jay and Eric, thank you for your military service to our country. And both or all of you for joining us again today. I want to begin by asking you each to tell us a little bit about your organizations and yourself. So Bob, if I could ask you to go first, please.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks. Thanks everybody for joining us. I've got a long career, but I've spent the first half of it really in institutional environments. Actually started out in the insurance industry right out of college, joined Chubb and then moved to Marsh and then Willis and had a variety of experiences, learned a lot about best practices, but I pivoted to the entrepreneurial side about halfway through. My first foray into that was actually an insurance industry roll-up. So I kind of got the entrepreneurial bug at that point, and that's eventually led me to forming BMR, Bridge My Return. I was, like many of you and those that observe the situation, just really kind of stunned and perplexed at what was happening to military members as they came out of the military, who weren't experiencing very much private sector success, despite, the enormous goodwill that employers have for hiring military veterans. So decided to try to tackle that. We did it really in a rather bold way, I think. One is we felt like we had to build the business on two beliefs, right? One was that you had to take a holistic approach to the problem, that you had to look at both the supply and demand side of the military hiring challenge at the same time. And then second, that technology could play a really big role in bringing some efficiency and some effectiveness and stress reduction to the process. But the technology by itself wouldn't be sufficient, that you had to pair that technology with support. So what we have is a tech-enabled hiring platform for the military community. We have not taken this increasingly popular, sexy demographic and plopped it onto an existing platform. It's been built from the ground up just for the military community. And it's a combination of technology and support. I'll get into the technology probably as we engage in conversation, but the support that we provide for individuals comes in the form of mentoring and coaching, and then the support that we provide to employers comes in the form of training, education, and military learning. Because we have made a business decision to only invite military-ready companies onto our platform. We'll talk a little bit about that down the road as well. Our technology, a couple of key pieces to it. One is we've built a military skills translator that takes the military occupational specialty, that MOS, and maps private sector skills to that military job, so they're getting credit for what they did in the military and can bring that with them. The application automatically spits out a resume when a profile is complete, and I think most importantly, our technology uses a skills-to-skills matching algorithm and not a job-to-job matching algorithm. And the reason we did that was to really circumvent pigeonholing that tends to take place. So excited about being with you guys and looking forward to the exchange with with everybody. And I'll just pause right there and turn it over to Jay.
Oh, thank you for that, Bob. Jay Salters, founder of Act Now Education. I'm currently active duty, been in the military for 21 years, prior enlisted, and now a naval officer. For me, we developed Act Now Education because there are a lot of resources out there and folks don't know what's available to them. And that can have an impact on your career. It can have an impact on your trajectory and what you're trying to do. And so there's 40,000 different resources out there. And what we wanted to do is put them all under one house and talk about them, the benefits, how can it help you, and also provide you additional resources. And so for us, we work with Coursera, we're partnered with PMI, and we're partnered with Splunk, and we provide free accounts for those organizations. And then we have our program that really dials into folks that are military spouses, veterans, transitioning service members, and veteran spouses to find job opportunities. It's called the 3-Cert program. Essentially what we focus on is giving you 3 certifications, PMP, Sec Plus, and Scrum, and then providing you with professional made resume, tailor-made business suit, connecting you with a Fortune 500 mentor, and then also having 3 interview preps and a headshot. As we go through the process, we put people together in teams and we push you forward with your team to accomplish different tasks, to include the certifications. And our turnout has been really great so far. We've had quite a few of our members, about 95%, get jobs from our program, specifically just because of the way we utilize the resources to kind of help you leap forward. And so that's what we do. That's how we do it. There's a lot of free resources out there. We don't tell anybody to pay for any resources. Definitely come check us out if you have any questions. But I'll pass it over to Eric.
Great. Well, thank you, Jay. And go Navy. Very excited having a fellow naval officer on this panel. I'm going to talk a little bit about my background because I think it really influences how I really work to lead Hiring Our Heroes, which is a nationwide grassroots organization. But a little bit of background, I think, is relevant to our story and our mission. I grew up in a small town in Indiana, and neither of my parents graduated from high school. And my dad, who was a Vietnam era veteran in the Air Force, told me that there's 1 of 2 ways to get ahead in life. You can either go to college or you can join the military. So I went to college the first time and did really well at a great liberal arts school, but found out that it was really hard to get a job, and really didn't know how to take those great skill sets that I learned from a great school and then translate those to the business sector. And so I then took the second way my dad suggested, which was join the military. And I joined the Indian Air National Guard and enlisted a while back. I won't say how far because I don't want to date myself. And at that time, I also ended up getting accepted in the law school, went to law school, and then joined the Navy. But what I found through this experience was that oftentimes with a lot of our service members, we can have great skill sets, and we certainly do. We have great educational backgrounds, but it's often really difficult because of where you come from and your socioeconomic background to understand how to translate those skills into meaningful careers. It can be awfully lonely for a lot of our service members, a lot of our college students, where they want something better, but taking and applying those skill sets to a career field that quite honestly is far away removed from what their familial experience is makes it really challenging. And so from a Hiring Our Heroes perspective, we started back in 2011 when there was a national crisis in veteran unemployment. When I came in 2013 and manned the organization, what I really focused on was how do we meet our military community where they are, not where we want them to be. We can get them there, and companies can get them there, and organizationally, whether it's upskilling through programs that we offer through Salesforce or Google Career Force, we can help people get to where we want them to be. But in the first instance, from a business perspective, from an association and organization perspective, how do we meet young men and women who have these great skill sets where they are, and then help them navigate the journey? And for Hire Our Heroes, we do that through a number of mechanisms, not only through some of our upskilling platforms, which have been really successful, but even with the right skill set, nothing beats an internship. And we operate the largest skill bridge program in the United States, helping to connect 3,000 transitioning service member to skill bridge opportunities. And so these programs are really intended to again, understand where people are, find ways to connect them with meaningful companies that are committed to hiring them, to the extent that we need to provide additional skill sets for these young men and women. We do that, and really then create that pathway through experiential opportunities with companies through SkillBridge. And so I'm really looking forward to having this broader conversation, and really excited to be here, and really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you all for your responses. Let me kind of set the tone here. In the chat, each of the panelists, they talked about their own organizations. We put their websites in the chat for you. So I appreciate you providing that for our group. And then also just a note, our audience is from the college and those that are interested in the military community. So it's primarily around the military community, and primarily around around financial services. And I was interested to hear Bob mention that he got his kickoff in Chubb and with the insurance industry. So obviously that rings a bell. So again, thank you all for that. Let me give you an additional opportunity to talk about your organization. I mentioned the idea of transition. I kind of overarched that, but our center has really been focused, especially starting this year, focused in on helping those military members, or those members out of the military community, in transition. That transition word is kind of big. It can be, right? It can be those coming out of uniform. It can be a military spouse going from one installation to the next, following their spouse around in uniform, that is in uniform. It can be a veteran that is in another industry and wants to get into the financial service industry. So obviously it's a pretty wide swath of response to that. So what do you feel your organization provides to this military community? And how important is that to transitioning military members, veterans, and spouses? And Jay, I'd ask you to kick us off on that.
Oh, absolutely. And so for our organization, not specifically what we focus on, like it said, there are quite a few organizations out there, and you have two great ones here with Hire Our Heroes and Bridge My Return. But there are quite a few organizations out there that can help get you to where you're trying to get. The thing is, you have to figure out what they are and what they provide, right? And so being able to determine that is probably usually is more difficult than for most. And then what we try to do is refine that process, right? We want to overwhelm you with 1,000 resources, but we want to give you some resources that are going to help you figure out what your path line is. And so for our 60,000 members within the Act Now community, we have a group that shares information. People ask questions. People are interested in trying to do certain things, trying to get, opportunities, or trying to connect with folks. And so we provide a culture-based community that provides you with resources that address those needs. One of the key things that we use is called Act Now Notebook. And it's really kind of like a dialed down version of, if I didn't have any clue what to do for my transition, where do I start? And it breaks that down. It has a checklist on there that goes from 3 years to 0. It has information about how to build your resume, how to write your resume, resources that you can reach out to get your resume done for free, getting a professional headshot, being able to identify what certification opportunities are out there that you can take advantage of for free at no cost. And then also programs like Hire Our Heroes, not Hire Our Heroes, I'm sorry, Hilton Honors, which offers essentially a free week stay if you're transitioning, you're trying to find a job, and you want to move from one location to another. So if you're in New York and you want to move to Texas or you want to move to Florida, Hilton will pay for a full week to allow you to do so, as long as this has to do anything with job hunt or job interview prep. And so a lot of those resources are not commonly known. And so what we try to do is put it all in front of you so that you can be able to digest that, figure out what your path is, and go from there. And one other thing I would say with that is, when you're starting that process of your transition, don't just go at it alone. Don't ever do that. Like, there's too many people who have gone through the process. Your transition is going to be definitely different from someone else. But what you want to do is find someone that's already doing the things that you want to do. Speak to them. You can use a tool like Veterati. You can speak to coaches on there. You get an hour call for speaking with somebody that's in that career field. And then you can also use programs like ACP, American Corporate Partners, which they offer you 12 months of mentorship in the career field that you're interested in. And those type of programs can help you out. Make sure you go to network events like you have 50 Strong, That's the Industry, the Keys. All these organizations bring employers to you so they can talk about opportunities that's available to you, especially in the financial industry. If you're interested in working for Wells Fargo, if you're interested in working for Navy Federal, there are a lot of different opportunities that these programs already connect you with people that want to bring on military, right? And the biggest thing is you just have to show up. You have to show up and tell them, hey, this is what I want to do. This is my resume. This is where I'm at, and touch base with people. And I feel that that's what we really provide, is just the way for the pathway to help you kind of determine which way you want to go.
Yeah, that's great. Eric? Eric?
Yeah, trying to get off mute. I'm going to go back to where I started, and I think it really is a function of meeting people where they are. And for us, that means a couple of things that I think are really critical. First and foremost, I think from a grassroots organizational level, that often means meeting people where they live, on their basis, and really understanding what they want to do next. We really work to help service members understand that simply what you did in the military doesn't mean that's what you have to do for the rest of your life. But if you want to do something different, then you have to start asking yourself some tough questions. Questions like, where do I want to live? What do I want to do when I transition? What skill sets will I need? And so that process of meeting people where they are is that grassroots functional, seeing them eye to eye in a personal one-on-one level. We feel very critical, understanding that the process of transition, Jim, as you mentioned, can be awfully scary. I mean, I've seen combat hardened veterans break down in tears about the transition process, because it's so different than what they're used to, and they feel completely unprepared to make that move, because it's so foreign to what they did in the military. And for many of them, they have families to take care of too, and that creates extra stress and burden. So that one-on-one grassroots approach is really critical. And then thinking holistically about what the pathways look like, and not make assumptions that, and I saw this very early on back in the 2012 and 13 timeframe. Companies would come to us and say, we have all these great jobs, but we can't get veterans to get hired into these jobs. And I often ask them, what was your sales pitch to them? Why is this a great opportunity? What's the follow-up? How do you get from where they are to where you want them to go? And oftentimes I got a shoulder shrug, because they really didn't think about it any more than the simple fact that they had created this opportunity. And it was like the movie Field of Dreams, that build it and they will come. And I think that what we saw both in the military and what we're seeing in the larger workforce really underscores that companies can't recruit like it's 1990 anymore. You really have to think about strategically where people are, what they need, and what the pathway is, and why your work matters. And that's really in my view, a very significant shift in how the business community operates. because before you post your jobs and you hope people would flock to them. It's not like that anymore. It's certainly not like that in the military. So, helping arm, as Jay said, arm people with the right skill sets and the resources. We very much view ourselves as a big tent organization. We do about 50 hiring events on installations every year. We do other grassroots types of events, networking receptions. We host our fellowships out of about 25 installations right now, our Skill Bridge program. And so we have a pretty significant presence on bases across the country, but it is certainly a team sport from a transition perspective. Work that my colleagues on this call are doing are there's no one size fits all approach, and that's what we tell service members. We can help you navigate it, but we're not going to provide all the services, and you have to do some work on your end as well.
That's right. That's exactly right. Appreciate that. Bob?
Yeah, just real quick. You talked about purpose, Jim. I mean, what we're trying to do is really make the job search process less onerous and less stressful. And sort of this understanding that, if you get employment right, if you find meaningful work, it has a cascading effect on all the other parts of your life, right? You think about, these pillars of society, right? Of healthcare and education and employment and housing, and how getting that right. And the same thing, Jay, with education, right? That it has a cascading effect on these other areas. And if you have someone and they've got meaningful work and they have career opportunities with an organization that's more likely to get them because they're military ready, what are the effects that would have positively on healthcare, particularly mental health, right? On housing and so on and so forth. So if we get this thing right, really all boats are going to rise. The other thing we have going for us, I think, and Eric, you alluded to it a bit, and that is, timing, right? Like we've always had mission on our side, but mission by itself doesn't get it done. You have to have traction, which Jay, you've got clearly. Hiring Our Heroes has. We're building, but you have to have timing on your side too. And I think timing is ideal for both the military job seeker and the military talent seeker for two reasons. One is current and one is future. Current labor market is such that companies of all sizes across the country, across industries, are challenged to find the talent that they seek in the time that they have. And they're going to have to tap into untapped pools of talent. And I would argue that military sits at the very top of that. Number two isn't current, but future, right? The future of work trend. You guys, this is what you guys are doing, right? And when you start thinking about that, it's not just around AI and robotics, and automation. It's the upskilling and the reskilling of the labor force. And you start thinking about the military once again. These are people who I like to say have been trained to be trained, right? They don't just accept training; they expect it, and when they get it, they'll devour it. So you start looking at that from the employer perspective, right? What is it that you're looking for? It's right there in front of you. You just got to take some of the confusion away. And that's, I think, what we're all trying to do in our own way.
That's excellent. One of the things that was mentioned, and I was talking with Amanda Raymond, our career services, she came back to me. She'd never been around the military community before. She came back to me and says, how does a military member navigate through all the resources out there? And I think each of you have hit on it a certain way, and that is you've got to find a pool. There's a lot of resources, but you got to find the right resource for you. And I think that's what we're trying to do here is bring some resources together. Each of your organizations has your connection along with other connections. And I appreciate that. We've had a question.
Can I add one more thing on timing?
Absolutely.
I had it written down and I just lost my train of thought. Keep going, I'll come back.
Yeah, so we had a question from the field, goes right along with the next train of thought is military ready companies and your work with them, how you connect with them. The question from the field was, how would you advise an employer to find military members in transitions? Where do they go to connect with them, the resources? And for your companies or your individual companies, what is your affiliation with military-ready positions? Bob talks about this all the time. Every time I talk to him, he always mentions military-ready or higher-ready positions and with military affiliation. So, Eric, I'll ask you to start us off on that, but particularly if you could note on the financial services side, that's obviously where the interest is for this group.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's an interesting question. I'm just going to, I mean, from my perspective, doing this for a decade now, I've never met a company who doesn't say they don't want to hire everyone. I mean, some of them do it really well and some of them do it really poorly. And that commitment's there. I spend very little time committing, especially I spend very little time having to convince a company, especially after COVID, that soft skills, especially in the leadership and the perseverance that military members bring and their adaptability and the fact that they're willing to work in offices, I don't have any trouble convincing people to hire veterans. The challenge often, and I'll steal a phrase from a CEO, I won't name the major car company, but what we often talk about is the frozen middle that exists where, from an executive leadership, CEOs understand the value that workforces bring to their skill sets, but we're fighting, a revolution in the workforce where we need people to start hiring people, not exactly like them, but to really look at a broader and more diverse set of skills and backgrounds that will make the business better. And that often falls on a hiring manager. And so, quite candidly, we spend a lot of time at that hiring manager level to have to really think strategically about what their objectives are, what they're trying to hire, and then kind of the best avenue of doing that. I do think that probably the greatest, one of the, if not the greatest, I think it's the greatest advantation created the last decade has been SkillBridge, in large part because for those who aren't familiar with SkillBridge, it creates for active duty service members an opportunity to do an internship or right before they get off of active duty. Our SkillBridge program, the fellowship program, gives active duty service members 12 weeks to showcase their skills in front of companies. A lot of the financial sector companies from the very biggest firms like JP Morgan, Wells Fargo are leveraging this program because what we have to do in this space, in my view, is how do we start to get past paper, resumes, and start looking at individuals based on the attributes and the skill sets that we need that will be successful. I don't think, the notion of SkillBridge, an internship for an active duty service member, in my view, it shouldn't be a foreign concept to anyone. How do most college kids in America get a job? Do an internship. It's because you have great training, you have great educational background, but companies often have questions about how those skill sets and that learning apply to the real world. I think it's the same for the military. And the more and more we can create these pathways that allow service members to shine, get their foot in the door, they take it from there. I mean, in almost every instance, you get a good service member to get their foot in the door, they're successful. And then the question isn't, I don't have to convince hiring managers at that point. Then they want to know where I get more. So I think from a company perspective, it's, part of this is how do we get companies to think differently about the process of bringing people in and getting out of the old ways of recruiting. But it also requires the Department of Defense to think differently through programs like SkillBridge that creates competitive advantages for their transitioning service members, which is critical in my view to recruiting. And how do we recruit the next generation of all volunteers? So that's my take on this. And we've seen, our SkillBridge program, 3,000 people, 85% offer rate, and the average salary is $115,000. And so
That's excellent. That is excellent, Eric, and I appreciate that. I do agree with you. I think in general, companies want to hire military. And military spouses. I think it's for us to help continue to talk with them about that. So, Bob, can you go on a little further to that?
Yeah, remember what I
If you
forgot.
want.
It had to do with timing. I think the other way that timing is on our side, and Eric, you alluded to it, I think a little bit, and that is kind of where HR is coming from, right? I think there's a shifting in terms of HR philosophy away from functional experience-based hiring and towards skill and competency-based hiring. Said differently, they're looking at what do you bring to the table versus how long you sat in the chair, right? And when you think about how arbitrary some of those decisions are, you need a college degree for this. Well, really, you don't think that military experience paired with an associate's degree more than compensates for that? Or do you really need 5 years of sales experience in the food industry in order to be considered for this job? So that the way it works for us is as soon as an individual completes a BMR profile, which is a 20 or 30-minute process, so it is an investment of time, which employers actually see as a built-in way of separating the serious from the non-serious job seeker, two good things happen to the individual, and it's all free. One is it unlocks their resume, which they can use inside or outside of the platform. And two, and more importantly, they'll instantly see the jobs they're matched to based upon how their profile meets the ideal candidate requirements that the employer has established for the position. And because these are military-ready employers, not only is that job going to be one that fits them, it's also going to be with an employer, because they're military-ready, who are more likely to get them and understand them, which kind of segues into what's military readiness, right? It's very different from military friendliness. I mean, to Eric's point, everybody's friendly around the military, but how ready are they? And so we look at this in a couple of different ways. One is it starts with, do you have enthusiastic executive support for the initiative? Because without it, it ain't going to happen, right? Two is this an organization that sees the business case in hiring military talent, that it's not just the right thing to do, which it is, but it's the right thing to do for the business? Three is, do they embrace DEIB more broadly? Are they an organization that, that believes in investing in people who have the right behaviors? Because if they do, you'll get that all day long with the military, right? Now, there's a lot of companies, in my opinion, particularly when you get into the smaller companies, that have the want to, but not the how to. They want to do it for all the right reasons. They just need a little bit of help getting it. And in those cases, that's where we'll invest in some military learning and training. People on the recruiting side, they don't know what an E4 is. They don't know what the Air Force equivalent of a soldier is. So if we can imbue them with a certain amount of knowledge and enthusiasm, not only is that knowledge going to increase, but enthusiasm is going to be created. And they get fired up about this. And it has an employee branding benefit to the organization who's doing that. People feel good about what they're doing here. And this ties into DEIB, it ties into ESG. And so we're at the right place at the right time, you guys.
That's great, Bob. I appreciate that. Jay? You're on mute, Jay.
I would say, as a transitioning service member, I would agree with what both Eric and Bob said. I'm coming to realize that there is a stark difference between military friendly and military readiness, right? And when I talk to companies and organizations about getting folks hired, the know-how is usually some of the issue, but there's a lot of disconnect within how to approach it, right? For them, they're a well-oiled machine on getting a new talent, the normal ways, normal processes, right? And then for the military talent, it might be a little bit different. Like for me, when we're working with military readiness organizations, that means they have an ERG, they have a support system, they can connect you with other veterans that are employed in their organization, that they can kind of give you the ropes and tells you what directions you should go, things that you should do, certifications that you can connect on. They have programs like the veteran tax credit, where you can get, essentially knowing that bringing on new talent allows the company to do well, but they also can give that back as being able to provide you with either certification, some training, or opportunities that can help you upskill. And so there's a real clear difference for me when it comes to that. One of the other things that I've noted is working with hiring managers or recruiters. Most of the time, they're really disconnected from the department that's hiring, right? And it's a completely different perspective, right? Because their goal is to get someone in the position based off of some requirements, right? And they may not have all the wherewithal on the position, the roles, because they're not working in that space or that office. And so a lot of times we try to cut right through that. We're speaking with people. That's why we say the biggest word for transitioning is network. It's the biggest word. If you do not have a network, it's better to have a network and not need one than to need a network and not have one. Networking helps most of our audience, most of our community. I would say probably about 80% get roles and jobs based off of the networking. And like last year, we got, I think it was 175 people jobs just off of connecting people with opportunities and networking. So there are an endless amount of possibilities, but you really have to understand the trajectory of where you're going and then the organization that you're going to. So when we pick or we work with organizations, we try to get a good understanding of what their functions are, what their mission, their vision is, and things of that nature. You should be doing the same, right? We shouldn't be blindly applying to organizations that don't even know what they're about, don't even know what their mission is, don't know what their vision is, don't know what their trajectory looks like, right? You have to understand how you can add value. Just like when you're in the military, your rank wasn't given to you, you earned it, right? And so you have to earn that transition. You have to learn the things that you don't know to fill in the gaps to be able to apply. There's, like I said, there's nothing, like I've been doing this for quite some time. There's nothing given, everything is earned. And so you have to have a game plan. And if you're not sure where to start, definitely reach out to us because we can help you with that. But having a game plan, identifying where you want to go, who are the people that can get you there, and then doing the work to do it, right? You can't just coast. You got to put that effort forward. You have to lean into it. And so a lot of the organizations we work with, that's what we make sure. How are you supporting the military community? What type of programs do you have? Are you really military readiness as far as like helping folks get into these roles and opportunities? What's the time frame look like between you interviewing somebody and hiring somebody? And then that's the things that we focus on. So that's how best we do it.
Yeah, and I must say, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I'm just amazed, Jay. You're an active duty officer doing the things that you're doing. I've been working with you for over a year now, and it's just amazing to me. The first time I met Jay, he was in Bahrain, deployed. So, and still doing this kind of stuff. So again, and Eric just shared a story with us on what he's working through. And it just goes to the heart of what I say the military is, right? It's adapt and overcome. We're gonna get through it one way or the other. And I just appreciate both of you. I mentioned our initiatives this year for the center was really to focus in on those in transition, whether it was out of the military, into financial services, spouse wanting to get into financial services. Bob, I know you specifically address acclimation difficulty. Can you expand on that just for a little bit and what that means?
Yeah, when we were looking at starting the business, we have to be solving a problem, and we were trying to solve the underemployment problem. And we identified 3 drivers to the chronic veteran underemployment problem. One was a certain level of stereotyping in the form of pigeonholing. You drove a truck in the Army, that's what you ought to do when you get out, that's what you know how to do. That's the advice that was being given and often being heeded, right? 2 is this notion of skills misunderstanding, the great difficulty that service members have, particularly enlisted service members have, in communicating their military skills and experiences into language that the private sector can understand. But the private sector has an equally difficult time making that translation in the other direction. And the third thing, to your point, Jim, is acclimation difficulty, right? It's real, right? It is like a principle of physics. It's hard, and you guys can speak to it. And it doesn't have any biases. It does not matter how old you are, the color of your skin, whether you're a woman or a man, the rank you attained, your education level. It's just damn hard. And that has to be recognized, right? And then that's where the military readiness kind of comes in too, because there has to be a certain amount of understanding and grace, I think, extended, right? It's sort of a shifting of things, right? Because when you think about, interviewing is all about self-promotion. And that comes very hard to military members, right? Humility doesn't sell well in an interview. And so if you've got somebody, to Jay, your point, who's coached up a little bit on this, and then you have an employer who's a little bit more understanding and so on and expects this, then you're going to have better outcomes. So I think acclimation difficulty is something that, is absolutely real. It's like a principle of chemistry.
It's so true. It's one of the things I always advise military members on when they get ready to transition is now's the time to sell yourself. I know that doesn't go within the military because we're always taught not to do that, but it is time to sell yourself. So I appreciate that. And I see Jay already is answering questions in the chat or noting comments in the chat. But Jay, I want you to just to talk a little bit about this notebook and the resources. I mentioned this resource piece up front, but can you tell us a little bit more about your notebook?
Yeah, so the notebook, like I said, is and thank you for that. The notebook is really to help give you some idea on the directions that you can go, right? Old ways won't open new doors, right? And so if you don't know about the resources that's available to you, you're limiting yourself, right? We all have this tool bag, right? What tools do you have in the tool bag that's going to help you get to where you're trying to go? And so we made this to be a really quick guide on things that you can utilize to get you going. Right? It's not the end all be all. But like I said, if you had nothing to start from, it's a good ground point to get you going. And so our focus overall is being able to provide, whether it's military spouses that's looking at the notebook, transitioning service members, veterans, everyone has a piece in there, right? The topics are, excuse me, sorry, the topics are transitioning from the military, right? And so talking about how to build resumes, identifying what programs provide resumes, mentorship programs, a list of all the different mentors. And it's pretty much a bunch of lists of programs and organizations that provide tools for those particular things. Everyone loves listicles, a list of things that they could choose from. And I know sometimes it could be overwhelming, but even I think on the third page or fourth page, we break it down like, don't overwhelm yourself. Identify 3 things that you want to do. Set a goal for those 3 things, and then start to knock it out. Once you complete those, then you can add more to your plate. But it's really meant to be able to help you move forward in that direction.
Yeah. It's, every GI loves a checklist, right? So I can appreciate that. Eric, you talked about hiring a heroes and hosting many interactive hiring events. Can you give us a little more insight to those, what that looks like when you go out and do those, and then the interactive? I'm sure you had to do some virtual ones too.
Yeah, I think that we started when we started in 2011. We really started out as a hiring events organization, in large part because we had, as part of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, we had all these state and local chambers with companies in local areas wanted to hire veterans. And so, that's how we really started. As the space started to evolve, we really started to think past those really initial hiring events, which I tell people we were really doing triage at the time. We were taking mostly unemployed veterans and connecting them to companies who would give them a chance. As veteran unemployment started to come down, we really started to shift our focus to a more big tent approach and an educational approach to transition. So, and we started to move left. I didn't want to deal with an unemployed. And I want to help them. I want to get to the point where they're making decisions before they end up in the unemployment line. And I think that part of what we've seen, and if we take a step back and think about how the space has evolved, this concept of moving left of transition has really started to, at least for the active duty transitioning service member, started to treat transitioning service members and the process by which companies find talent much in the same way that you do college campus recruiting. You meet people where they are, you create opportunities for them, and then you help to navigate that pathway. And I will tell you, in 2014, the Department of Defense paid over $1 billion in unemployment compensation for unemployed service members. $1 billion. I think last year was $150,000 or a little over. I think it was about $100 million. It was, such a dramatic way in which service members transition that I think, for my generation of active duty service members, there was an expectation that the unemployment line was in fact your first step until you figured out what you wanted to do. And that's no longer the case. And I think that speaks volumes as to how much the space has grown, how much companies value. And so from an event perspective, we really try to create that opportunity for service members who want to directly connect at a hiring event. Great, if that's what I want to do. If skilling and reskilling or mentorship, our events do that. And in often instances, we're bringing in community partners to really help them navigate other skill sets they may need, because quite honestly, I don't do resume, writing for people. Great organizations do it. We don't, but we want to make sure we connect them with the right organizations will do that. So we try to take a comprehensive approach with those events. I think we do about 50 events now on base every year. We do another 30 or 40 virtual events. Sometimes some of them are larger hiring events, and sometimes they're more industry focused. The financial industry sector, insurance industry sector focused opportunities for people who know what they want to do, but want to make those connections.
Yeah, that's excellent. And again, I want to, unfortunately, we're out of time, but I wanted to give you an opportunity just to, say just a few more words about your organization and see if you had any follow on to anything that was discussed. And I'll start with Bob again. Bob, anything?
Yeah, I guess I'll just use an analogy, right, for BMR, right? I think, and I use a football analogy. Sometimes I use too many sports metaphors. But our software gets you immediately into the red zone, right? Immediately, you get to the short list. You're in the red zone right away, whether you're a military job seeker or a military talent seeker. But to get from the red zone into the end zone, it takes a little bit of TLC, right? A little personal touch. And that's where our mentors come in and work with those individuals on that short list, work with the companies on that short list of candidates to get them over the top. Because at the end of the day, we want to be scoring touchdowns and not kicking field goals. So I'll just pause on that. The other thing we should talk about at some point are military spouses, whose challenges are very different.
Absolutely. And I know, Bob, you, every time I speak with you, you always talk about the care providers as well. Your organization does help with care providers of the military community. So I appreciate that as well. So anything that we said in here obviously is intended for the military spouse as well, because our center does focus on military spouses. We provide scholarships to military spouses as well. So hopefully we have a few of them online as well. Jay, anything you want to follow up with?
The biggest thing I can say is we can have 10,000 resources out here speaking to these folks about what's available, resources to use. Just understand the application is on us, but the execution is on you. And so for those who are listening, that's the reason why Act Now is Act Now. We want you to take this information, utilize it, and act now. And understand, like, wherever your goals is, your aspirations, your dreams, your ambitions, whatever it is, it could be running a marathon to, getting a new job or, getting a new position or completing your master's degree. You have to understand that all those things require some type of sacrifice and commitment. And if you don't sacrifice for what you want becomes a sacrifice. So keep those things in mind as you guys, go down your journey. Make sure you don't take any of these paths alone. Obviously, no one's going to run with you your whole marathon, but there are along the ways there's going to be someone that comes alongside you and can help you out and at least guide you in that direction or run with you for a bit. And so do those things. Make sure you share information that you come across, connect with somebody, identify opportunities that you're interested in, and, focus on your goals and your dreams.
Excellent advice. Excellent. Thank you, Jay. Here, Eric.
Yeah, well, Jim, I'm going to put an exclamation point on what Bob said about military spouses, and you mentioned. I'm going to tell you what I tell every company in the country. If you have a veteran or a military connected community program that doesn't include military spouses, you have half a program. I mean, we're in a country where we have, for veteran unemployment, 2.5% unemployment, and military spouses are 21%. It is, and with COVID and the emergence of remote and portable work opportunities, there is no reason in this country that any segment of our population, especially military spouses who have made tremendous sacrifices for this country should have to choose between having a career and continue to serve alongside their spouse on basis. And we as a country need to figure this out. The military is. I can tell you that I have the honor of working. I was Monday at the White House with the president and the first lady and Sheila Casey of joining forces. This is a top priority for our country, and we have to figure it out. It's going to impact recruiting. It impacts national security, and there's again, there's no reason for it. And so, as an organization, we are working aggressively, and we're trying to do it at a grassroots level. Quite honestly, we're not going to change what has been decades of challenges that military spouses face overnight. And if we have to do it one community at a time, I'm committed to doing that. Hiring Our Heroes is committed to doing that. But we have to tackle military spouse unemployment. These are incredibly talented people who have great things to offer to our workforce, and we have to stop recruiting like it's 1980.
Yeah, exclamation point, right?
I just want to add one thing to that. And then you're spot on. The typical recruiter at the typical company is going to look at the typical military spouse application, 80% of whom are women, and summarily dismiss it because they're going to look at the way they look at everything. And they're going to look at it and say, look at this job hopping. Look at these holes and gaps in a resume. Look at part-time work thrown in with full-time work. And basically getting dinged for the very things they ought to be getting kudos for. And that's the narrative that has to change. And I think a combination of software and, in our case, employer education is going to be part of that recipe. Turn those dismal numbers.
Again, thank you all so much for sharing your thoughts. We could go on for 2 or 3 more hours if we had the time, and I certainly appreciate your insight. As I mentioned for the audience, in the chat box are each of their websites and the other products that we talked about that they provided. That I'd encourage you to go through that and look those up. And I also want to thank our audience for joining us again today. So with that, thank you so much. I'll turn it over back to Phil.
I also wanted to take the opportunity to emphasize to those who are in transition about utilizing the Career Pathways Guide developed by our Career Resources Department. You can receive your free copy at the link shown on the screen, and it's also in the chat. Also wanted to take this opportunity to inform you about the Center's upcoming premier event, our 9th annual Clam Bake and Soldier Citizen Award Ceremony will be held at the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia, where we will be honoring Admiral Michael G. Mullen, United States Navy, retired. The following day, our leadership symposium will be held at the Lowe's Hotel in Philadelphia as well, featuring a panel of distinguished leaders in business, education, and the military, followed by our marquee speaker, Colonel Nicole Malachowski, U.S. Air Force retired. And she is the first woman pilot on the Thunderbirds Air Demonstration Squadron. The registration for our event is now open. The link is included on the slide and is also in the chat. Thank you and have a wonderful day.